So when I played the PvP mode for my last video, compared to the other ones, it felt like I'd barely scratched the surface, and so I've decided to investigate further. And what better way than forcing people to fight for my amusement? I've gathered 8 volunteers and separated them into 2 teams of 4. We've got Team Beans versus Team Cube, battling it out for dominance. Winner gets absolutely nothing, so there's a lot on the line here. Compared to when I played it, I made the incredibly correct choice of giving everyone starting supplies, because starting from nothing has 0 strategical implications, and starting with electric miners and inserters saves both teams 20 minutes of busy work. We're off with both teams trying to set up early power for their miners so that they can move on to smelting. And let me just say, being a spectator is really annoying, because you can't zoom out all the way like you can in editor mode, so you end up needing to pan very slowly across the entire map to look at the other team's build. Yeah, you can just go into map view, but then you can't click on things. And then you forget you're in map view because it doesn't have the scan lines it usually does, and you wonder why you can't click on anything. Anyway, I've banned the use of external blueprints under threat of being nuked from space, but laying out ghosts like this is pretty smart, especially for coordinating with your team. After 6 minutes, Team Cube already has their iron stack up and is making some early belts, while Team Beans is dragging their feet a little bit, deconstructing walls for some reason. They did start research earlier, so that's a slight advantage, but they really should be getting those stacks up instead of mining directly into furnaces. There's no need to mine this much coal. 2 of them start running out of the base, and I'm not sure of their goal. It's a bit early to mount an assault, but it seems they're using some of those harvested walls to try and get an early hold on the oil patch. Not a bad plan, seeing as it's the most convenient one between both bases, but it feels like getting early resources squared away would be better, since it'll only be relevant for chemical science. Team Cube is getting those circuits up, and I expect to see some green science pretty soon. After securing the oil, one of the Bean Boys keeps running towards the Cubarians. They actually happen to run into one of the Cubarians in the middle of running power lines. It feels like their goal was to set up some forward radars, until they got distracted. They take out a power pole. I'm not sure of the strategical worth, but perhaps it's psychological warfare. This shows the power of the pistol, because even with 2 firing, it's impossible to outdamage them eating fish. That is, until you drop down a ton of gun turrets and fill them with ammo. Well, that's some early automation, definitely on a good track. In contrast, Team Beans doesn't appear to have made much progress since then. There's a lot of early hand-fed designs, despite having the means to fully scale up. And there it is, they've got green science. I feel like this is the most important step for PvP, and once you have it, the real game begins. Here's this guy again, menacing the power poles. What's the plan? Perhaps we'll never know. Team Beans is finally getting their first stack up and running with the obligatory belt automation, and once again, straight to the power poles. I guess the plan here is to be as annoying as possible, because there they go again. Apparently the submachine gun outranges gun turrets. And then this begins, the most Benny Hill chase I have ever seen. And somehow, even though the Bean Boys are down 1 player, they've managed to neutralize one of the other team's players purely by being a nuisance. If you're not confident in your skill but manage to waste the time of someone better than you, I guess you come out on top? Sadly, those efforts appear to be in vain because Team Cube is up to steel. Also, I just realized that you can click on the labs and see what the team is researching, which again, you can't do if you're in map view. Well, Team Beans finally has green science up, but they've got quite a ways to go if they hope to catch up. Honestly, I think they could still win if they went all in with grenades and just Zerg rushed the Cubarians, but to be fair, that would require knowing that they're this far behind. Watching this, I was confused, but then I realized that they were intentionally dying in order to respawn with more miners, inserters, and belts, because apparently setting the items each player starts with counts for every single time you respawn. It looks like Team Cube is ready to expand to oil, and that little outpost is slowing them down, but it's not going to stop them for long, especially now that they have cars. I think after taking down that outpost, they immediately realized the power of the car, because suddenly they're assaulting the Bean base. The car can just outrange the default turrets, so there's not much they can do. After that, they punch a hole in the wall and breach containment. Honestly, I'm starting to think that the starting walls and gun turrets lull players into a false sense of security. If they were left in an open field, maybe they'd be a little bit more aware of their defenses, because the moment that wall's open, this happens. The power of a car against a bunch of people on foot is insane. The entire Bean team is struggling to do anything. Before it was 1 player for 1 player, but now it's 1 player holding off all 4. If they were behind before, this certainly isn't helping. Eventually they manage to blow up the car, but they're way too crippled to finish the job, and the assailant just saunters off. Meanwhile, Team Cube is sitting pretty. After the assault, Team Beans has surrounded their silo with furnaces to stop cars from getting near, but perhaps unintentionally, it looks a little bit like a bullseye, don't you think? They try to start automating things like ammo and gun turrets, but it isn't long before they're under assault again. They probably should have fixed that hole in the wall. Well, here we go again. And this time they drop a bunch of turrets in the base so they can stop and repair the car. And the audacity. Team Beans is having none of that and immediately blows up the offensive slogan. Now is a good old Mexican standoff, turrets versus turrets. I think a lot of the skill in PvP is how quickly you can drop a bunch of gun turrets and fill them with ammo. Eventually they're pest-free, but they still haven't gotten anything done in like 15 minutes. Meanwhile, the Biters are doing more against the Cubarians than the entirety of Team Beans. They're currently working on chemical science, and while I wasn't looking, the Bean Boys appear to have sabotaged the oil supply. I don't think it'll save them much, but it's something. I have no idea why Team Cube is trying to set up rails, but maybe they're going for the win by rocket even though they could just rush in right now. They're trying to research the tank, but at this point it's just not necessary. Team Beans has realized the hopelessness of their situation, and they're also more than aware of the power of the car. It seems like they're going to try for one last desperate push. They're trying to sneak around below while one of them distracts the others. It's honestly not a bad strategy, and they're all up there nowhere near the bottom. But unfortunately, the Biters appear at the wrong time, and their massive pollution cloud actually does Team Cube some favors. It's looking like car latency is a major factor to your combat effectiveness. Makes me wish those improvements teased for the expansion were out already, but here they are, knocking at the gates. They take out the turrets, and then they start throwing grenades at the wall, not really caring that one of their teammates is in the crossfire. They're in. Team Cube knows they're here, and they're putting up turrets everywhere. Team Beans just kind of forgets and waits for them to load their own turrets. Like I said, if you can't place turrets fast, you're gonna lose. That's their push completely annihilated. With a little more coordination, they may have been able to rush their totally undefended silo and take down an overconfident Team Cube, but alas. Not long afterwards, one of the Cubarians is literally beating the wall apart with his bare fists. As soon as he's inside, there's not much they can do. They've lost all their supplies and they're totally helpless to the gun turret spam. It's now a matter of placing turrets and drilling to the core of their silo's defenses. Then they place a ton of landmines, and the thing just explodes instantly. Wow, I did not realize that landmines were that powerful. There it is, Team Cube is victorious. Turns out it's a little tough to balance these teams, because pure hours played isn't a good enough indicator of skill, and that was looking a little one-sided there. This kind of ended up being long enough to be a little exhausting, but short enough that it feels like we've got to do another one. So some people leave, and it's all chaos because I didn't plan for this. But instead of doing 4v4, I break it up into 2v2v2v2. I've run out of good names, and so now we've got Team Memes and Team Team joining the teams. And this time, there's one major difference. I'm playing. Team Beans may have gotten thrashed, but it looks like I've got to become Team Beans' strongest soldier. Also, I switched the starting items to chests because responding with everything was a little silly. But then I noticed something's wrong. Where's my teammate? I guess they just left right when it started, but I literally need to shout, otherwise no one can hear me. After screaming into the void, my prayers are answered when this random dude suddenly appears. I've got no idea who this is, and after the game I checked and they've said like one thing in my super secret server ever, but whatever, we'll make it work. This confusion completely shatters my concentration, and you can tell because I start setting up iron before setting up power, and when I do that, the fact that I've got so many electric miners makes me completely forget that I haven't actually researched logistics yet, and so I don't have access to splitters. Like, it's usually the second thing you research, but we skipped that whole stage, so I'm suddenly a little frazzled on how to set up the furnace stacks. My teammate's shown some initiative by already building part of one, but again, my usual design is worthless without access to underground belts and splitters. So after I run power, I handcraft some science and throw that into the lab, so that'll research while I finish setting up the iron stack. And you can really tell I'm still thrown off my game because I start setting up the copper stack one tile away from the iron one by accident. Whatever, it's fine. I just need to account for the fact that yellow undergrounds are only 4 tiles long and bend it a bit. If there's one thing I've learned about PvP, it's that speed is everything. It's definitely nice starting with the resources to set up the first stacks, but the time spent hand-feeding drills at the start does give you ample time to plan everything. This is just 0 to 100. I'm out of the belts we started with, so definitely going to want some more, as well as this handful of emergency gears. I start setting up the circuits, only to remember that I don't actually have logistics science researched yet, and so I throw together this really dirty build that'll work for like 5 seconds because I completely forgot to select something for research. It's actually impressive how poorly my brain is working right now, but it's not like I've ever let that stop me. Like I said, that build ended up doing like 10 packs worth of research, because by the time I remembered, I'd already set up the actual red science build, which sucks. I mean, I built for green science first because I forgot I didn't actually have them researched yet, and so I just kinda tacked this on. I imagine my actions are as confusing to my teammate as they are to me, because they're just off playing with the furnace stacks. However, while I'm setting up automated long-handed inserters and stuff, it's nice that they finish up the green science build I forgot about as I'm running around schizophrenically switching projects. I've got miners, and I'm really going to want to use these to speed up my iron production, because right now it's pretty lacking. We also set up some brick production, because seeing what happened to the players last game, being able to add thicker walls might just come in handy. Right now, I'm trying my hardest to research logistics too, and we haven't really talked much, but this is when I assure my teammate that I do have a plan. You know, just in case they started to doubt after seeing the quality of the base. Anyway, I'm sure you can guess what I'm after with all these assemblers. I'm going to be making hundreds and hundreds of grenades. Sure, it's eating all the iron and forcing me to hand-feed the red science with gears, but who cares? This base is crap, but it's exactly as good as it needs to be. The only thing I'm really missing at this point is a steel setup, and I set up some more miners down below and start setting up the furnaces. My teammate works on finishing them up for me as the engines are researching. That is the only thing that I needed this steel for. I considered making red ammo, but that'll just take too long. And not long after, I've started researching the car. With only some engine units separating us from the most effective means of transportation, I set them up as fast as possible. Who cares about aesthetics? Who cares about expandability? We just need the element of surprise. In preparation, I order my teammate to start harvesting the gun turrets all around the perimeter. I never automated ammunition and gun turrets because I needed that iron for other things, but why should I when there's a bunch of free ones all around the base? I also join them, taking a couple for myself while researching heavy armor and things like extra explosive damage. It's almost time for my plans to come to fruition, and with some handcrafted heavy armor and cars, I'm ready. I'm gonna flank around this side and pick up some fish for healing. So I'm just fishing, preparing myself mentally, and then I see that our walls are being destroyed. At first I'm panicking, thinking that another team is already doing what we were about to do, but as I'm rushing over there, I realize that it's just biters and my teammate was perhaps a little overzealous with removing the turrets. Tons of them got inside, and this is really slowing me down, but it would be pretty embarrassing to lose to biters at this point, so I've just got to take care of them. I debate whether to fix the base, and I decide I should, since the finished damage research will definitely help. Also, my teammate appears to have died to some biters elsewhere, presumably in an attempt to remove the nests from our pollution cloud. Well, I pick him up and drive him down, and start dropping turrets to take out the nest. After the delay, it's finally time to enact the master plan. Throw grenades at everything until they die. It's honestly quite unfair how machine guns can outrange gun turrets. If you actually wanted to protect yourself from this tactic, you'd need laser turrets, flamethrowers, or landmines, all of which would take you longer to get than someone can build a car and some grenades. It's not untenable, but it's difficult to counter. Anyway, once we're inside, there's no additional defenses, and we're free to place down a ton of turrets for cover as we blow up the silo. That's one team down, and it honestly wasn't a bad-looking base. Much better than ours, but that's the advantage of the early rush. And keeping in that spirit, there's 2 more teams left, and it's best to hit them before they have time to realize that there's someone out here on the hunt. Also, their turrets are harmless now. I wanted to look at their base more, but I didn't have the time. Fortunately, the only other person recording this game was on that team we just killed, so now I have access to footage from spectator view. Hooray! I think overall, my opinion of PvP has come to regard it as something akin to rock, paper, scissors. It's like Tank Rush wins, but early car beats Tank Rush. Turtling beats early car, Tank Rush beats turtling, landmines everywhere beat Tank Rush, and rocket beats everything, and so on and so on. It feels like one of those genetic algorithms, and I think that that's interesting, but because of how long the games are and how few people play these modes, it's unlikely that anyone's ever going to play Factorio PvP enough to really boil it down to strats that result in actual push and pull. Because as it is, it's mostly one team plays their hand and either instantly wins or slowly loses. The fact that your defenses are totally helpless and easily cheesable without your actual presence definitely makes things rough, and one reason why I think at minimum you need 2 players to make it feel fair. At the very least, I think the lack of any RTS elements makes it difficult because you can't spread units around or react to attacks. Also, the alert system isn't really designed to give you the feedback necessary to make it feel like you're able to react in time. Enemy players are essentially invisible on your minimap, and it's impossible to differentiate from player and biter attacks. Maybe if there was some proximity detector circuit, or some special sounds or HUD elements when players are attacking. I've thought about putting the engineer in a Spidertron with no weapons so that mobility isn't as big of an issue, and cheesing with vehicles is less likely, but then the question becomes, how do you attack? When I was thinking of ways to rectify this, I realized that everything I thought up would just turn it into Mindustry's PvP. Mindustry? Whatever. Factorio PvP is fun, and definitely has plenty of potential that people haven't yet explored, but it's definitely a bit of a weird challenge. Anyway, here we are at the final base. Team. It's got two of the better players from the last match, and if I'd known they were here, I would have taken them out first, but fortunately they haven't set up defenses either. As it turns out, they were both out of the base at the time, and then one of them comes driving in heroically attempting to stop us with counter turret spam. It's 2v1 though, and while he was close to destroying our turrets, ultimately we're free to destroy the silo. I did it for you, Beans. Only after watching the other footage did it make sense why they were missing. They were trying to take down our silo first. And if they'd just been a little bit faster, they probably would have won, but that was intense, and unfortunately, my ego is intact. So yeah, there's Factorio PvP. It's actually a really interesting game mode, and actually underrated. Give it a shot. Okay, see you later.